Now that he's an official, formal rival to Donald Trump for the Republican presidential nomination, Ron DeSantis is finally swinging back against Trump. Kinda. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. So Ron DeSantis has officially announced his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election, and his ultimate target is to dethrone President Biden in the 2024 general election. But first, to paraphrase Ben Shapiro, who also will appear in this video, Ron DeSantis has to get through Donald Trump, who is currently leading him by like 20 or 30 points according to aggregate polling. Now, Trump has been pretty proactive from the beginning about taking shots at DeSantis, presumably because there was a time, and there may yet eventually be a time, when DeSantis was a credible threat to him for the Republican nomination. So Donald Trump, who is a thin-skinned, malignant narcissist of very low intelligence, but also killer instincts, right? This man loves a fight, and he loves to wrestle in the mud, so to speak. He was starting to take shots at Ron DeSantis for months now, months and months and months, taking subtle shots for Trump and blatant shots for Trump, which pretty blatant. And all the while, DeSantis basically ignored it. And the logic was, DeSantis's logic was, I am a serious statesman and politician, and I shan't defend myself and lower myself into attacking Donald Trump. I have eyes on the Democrats, and that's exactly what people should do. And there is some sort of logic to that. Like, I get that. I understand that instinct. Also, Ron DeSantis has very little personality, and also he probably would not do well in a mudslinging contest against the ultimate mudslinger. So there was also some practicality there as well. The problem is, the Republican base, they love their mudslinging. They love it. It's part of the reason why Donald Trump was so wildly successful among the Republican base compared to, more generic, standard, conventional politicians like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, because he spoke truth, he told you like it was. And they love that. They love the insults and the banter and the mudslinging because they confuse that with strength. That's strength to them. Now, those of us who know better understand that that's actually probably a manifestation of profound insecurity, at least on Trump's part. But whatever. That is the metric by which many Republican voters determine strength. So now the question is, especially given that he's lost momentum and he's trailing in the polls, will DeSantis start taking shots back? Will he start, instead of just like ducking and weaving, will he jab back, or will he even proactively initiate the confrontation? Which brings us to a really interesting interview that DeSantis had after he announced with Daily Wire guru Ben Shapiro. Okay, gang, but first, whose wife is a doctor, by the way. He wants you to know that. This was actually a really interesting interview. It was about 14 minutes long, and I'll probably do another video about another part of the interview because it's not really germane to this one. But I want to play a clip in which Shapiro tees up a direct question, kind of challenging DeSantis to criticize Trump. So let's play the clip and see how he does.
So how do you see a difference between your candidacy, what you've been trying to do, your record, and President Trump?
Well, I think it's interesting because he's been attacking me by moving left. So this is a different guy than 2015, 2016. He attacked me for opposing an amnesty bill in the Congress. He did support this amnesty, this good luck too. 2 million illegal aliens he wanted to amnesty. I opposed it because that's what America First principles dictate, that you're opposed to amnesty. He also attacked me for voting against an omnibus spending bill that was bloated, full of pork, and that racked up huge amount of debt for this country. Yes, I voted against the omnibus. He signed every omnibus that was put on his desk. And so I think it's odd that he's doubling down on those positions, because those were instances in which his actions did not match his campaign rhetoric. And I also think just the difference between 2015 and 16 and now is I, as chief executive of Florida, and he as chief executive of the United States, we both faced COVID-19. And we both responded in the way we did. He responded by elevating Anthony Fauci and really turning the reins over to Dr. Fauci, and I think to terrible consequences for the United States. I was the leader in this country in fighting back against Fauci. We bucked him every step of the way, starting in April of 2020, whether it's the schools, the businesses, the mandates, and our state has never done better as a result. We're number one for in migration, number one for growth, and we continue to see great things happen. But it required me to cut against the grain. It required me to know that every decision I made was going to be met with opposition from the media and from the left. But you do what's right and you don't let them cow you. And so I think Fauci should have been fired. And I think the fact that Donald Trump gave Anthony Fauci a presidential commendation on Trump's last day in office, that was a gut punch to millions of people around this country who were harmed by Fauci's lockdowns.
Yeah, Governor.
So before we go on, because there's a bit more of this, I will say, obviously, I support Dr. Fauci. Obviously, I thought that Dr. Fauci and the medical establishment, not that they got everything right, but generally speaking, it's shrewder to defer to experts, be it automotive experts when you're going to get your car repaired, or physicians when you have a medical issue, or surgeons when you need surgery, or pilots when you need to fly a plane, whatever it may be. Not that they're perfect or beyond reproach, but generally speaking, they're probably more likely to have better ideas than laymen in their particular areas of expertise. But I do appreciate that DeSantis points out that for whether you like Fauci or not, Fauci was a Trump administration official. And this is really important because a lot of conservatives and Republicans like to pretend that, I don't know, that just Fauci emerged during the Biden administration, when in reality, this man had a commendable record of bipartisanship. He was appointed by President Reagan, served under Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump, and then Biden. Dr. Fauci was a bipartisan administration official. He wasn't a bureaucrat. He was an expert. So DeSantis is actually pointing this out that, hey, if you hate Fauci, which a lot of Republicans do, blame Trump. Trump could have fired him. Trump could have ignored him. Trump could have, suppressed him. And instead, in some cases, Trump didn't do those things. Now, I would argue he was nowhere near as consistent with his support of Dr. Fauci and helped undermine Dr. Fauci's best practices. But yeah, Fauci was a Trump administration official, and it's very important for people to remember that. That way it undermines this notion that, again, to whatever degree you hate Fauci, that you just absolve Trump of giving Fauci or letting Fauci keep his job, if that's important to you, which, again, as a Democrat, as a lefty, I love Fauci. For all, again, not exactly perfect, particularly on the messaging, but generally speaking, best practices, and was the medical expert. Now, I want to go on to the next clip or the next part of the conversation, because, again, this trend where Shapiro is teeing up DeSantis to criticize Trump, it continues. And let's hear what he has to say.
DeSantis today, the president actually attacked you by suggesting that Andrew Cuomo had done a better job in New York, which is sort of a shocking thing coming from a president who's declared that he is the enemy of the left when it comes to COVID. Andrew Cuomo, of course, did not do a better job. He's been citing statistics, using sort of absolute numbers of people who died per state, as opposed to looking at population adjusted, which of course seems deeply dishonest just on a statistical level. What's your take on those attacks?
They're very bizarre. I mean, first of all, Florida had less excess mortality than California or New York. Part of that is because states like California had excess mortality derived from the lockdown policies, which is really, really avoidable mortality. But if he thinks Cuomo handled it better, that's an indication if something like this were to happen again, he would double down and do what he did in March of 2020. That was a difficult situation. We didn't have all the facts, and people can kind of understand, if you did things that may not have worked out. But we all have to sit here today in 2023, look back at March of 2020 and say Fauciism was wrong. Fauciism was destructive. Fauciism has set us on this path with the CARES Act and the Fed printing money, creating inflation, and creating some of the economic problems that we have today. So if you could do it again, would he do the same thing? I sure hope not, because those were not the right decisions to make. And I've said very clearly, if I'm president, somebody like Fauci is in the government, I will bring them in and I will tell them two things. You are fired.
It's always been.
So I want to point that first things first, I'll tell them. So I never heard that part. But okay, DeSantis there at the end. I'll tell them two things. You are fired. Okay, so those are words, not things, and those are three words. What he meant to say was, I'll tell them two words. You're, the contraction for you are, fired. So he screwed the landing on that. That's funny. But the other thing I want to point out, and I thought I had this right, but while the clip was playing, I went back and looked up the CDC, and when you adjust by age, in terms of per capita death rate, Florida does have a higher death rate, or did have a higher death rate under COVID compared to New York and California. So if it's at the cdc.gov, you see death rate of 111.7, California had 99.9, New York 83.9. So, no, DeSantis is lying about Florida's performance under COVID. Now, again, the policies that DeSantis executed during COVID did make him very popular with a lot of people in the state, including, I imagine, quite a few independents. You know, no one enjoyed the lockdowns. No one enjoyed masking or social distancing or all these. Nobody. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't yearn for it, didn't love it. Nobody did, right? So it's easy to understand why a state with relatively lax COVID guidelines, and also, I think, a whack job that he put in charge of, like, the state's, like, health secretary or whatever was, like, a COVID and vaccine skeptic. It's understandable why lax policies would be attractive to people who, for whatever reason, you know, for understandable reasons, want to live their lives even in the midst of a crisis. But in terms of the efficacy of those policies, Florida did have a higher death rate compared to, when you adjust for age and population, compared to California and New York. So he's wrong about that. But anyway, the bottom line is, this is the first time that I've really seen DeSantis, like, genuinely, not through proxy, not through, like, super PACs funding him, but directly criticizing consistently Donald Trump. Now, it was relatively tepid, right? It was relatively tame. You know, that wasn't quite mudslinging, but perhaps we will see DeSantis try to, like, flex his muscles to whatever extent he has any and try to take Trump on more aggressively rhetorically. And as somebody on the left, as a Democrat, my thought instantly goes to the professor in the 2014 Godzilla remake, where, you know, Godzilla is engaging the other kaiju, and he goes, "Let them fight." That's how I feel. That's how you should feel. This is going to be good.